Hey, listeners, if you haven't joined Stitcher Premium yet, now's the perfect time. Stitcher Premium gets you completely ad free episodes of hundreds of shows, like Comedy Bang Bang, WTF with Mark Maron, and How Did This Get Made? You also get 21,000 hours of exclusive content. New exclusive originals like Marvel's Wolverine and Issa Rae's Fruit are launching every week for Stitcher Premium members. If you love podcasts, you are missing out. When you listen to ad-free apps in Stitcher Premium, your favorite podcasters get paid. Help support your favorite shows and join Stitcher Premium today. For a free month of listening, go to stitcherpremium.com and use promo code POCKET. All right, so Microsoft came ready this week with a small convertible tablet that starts out at $399. Unfortunately, unlike an iPad, if you really want to take your computing somewhat seriously, you're going to need to spend upwards of $800 on the second go. Does it make sense? So we can see that out and look into the 5 camera trend that seems to be cropping up throughout the future. Plus, why you don't care about blockchain, you probably care about HTC and the impending. Whoa, excuse me. Let me just make sure that my volume is
I
down.
was about to say I
I
can't.
turned it.
I can see your
turned it
lips
wrong.
moving.
I turned it the wrong way. I was like, I was sure that said like 0, and then I made it.
We're okay. Okay, take
Should I
2.
start? Should I start over? I guess I should. I'll just say it out loud, and we'll see what happens. Okay, ready? Microsoft came rip roaring ready this week with a small convertible tablet that starts out at $399. Unfortunately, unlike an iPad, if you really want to take your computing somewhat seriously, you're going to need to spend upwards of $800 on a Surface Go. Does it make sense? We'll sort that out and look into the 5 camera trend that seems to be cropping up for the future, plus a lesson on case design, why if you don't care about the blockchain, you should probably care about HTC, and the impending death of the 4-inch iPhone. Again, all this and more as we unfold the week's news and then get a bit of dust in it and then make the keyboard not work, but at least the keys are quiet and the chipset is updated. I don't know. What do you expect from the MacBook Pro? It's the Pocketnow Weekly, episode 313, recorded on Friday, the 13th of July, 2018. This is the show from Pocketnow in conjunction with XDA developers that delves into everything that moves and is technology, from smartphones to tablets and wearables. It is the stuff you probably couldn't make up even in your wildest imaginations as a kid. I'm Jules Wong, news editor at Pocketnow, joined by editor-in-chief still, Anton D. Nudge. Hello to you, sir.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everybody. Good to be here. How are you?
I'm doing just well if it wasn't for that little flub that I did on the technical side here. But hey,
We apologize.
we all make mistakes and we'll live with them. I apologize too. And we'll just move on from that. How was your week, by the way?
My week was busy, but that's nothing out of the ordinary. All of my weeks are busy, but it's been an exciting week. But I can say this much: I'm glad it's over, or it's about to be over, because as soon as I hang up this hangout, I'm going to be out of here.
You're going to have dinner. You're going to be out on the town. It's going to be great. Definitely
Anything just to get out of the office.
Indeed. Definitely a busy week for us here as we make the transition. Obviously, you've probably seen the posts by now that we are working with XDA developers in a very, shall we say, synergistic capacity here. So sooner or later, you'll be seeing changes. They're going to be for the good. And both of us are going to be a part of it to lead on the transition. And it's going to be a fun time, I guess.
Exciting, at least.
At least. Yeah, it's going to be the base level exciting, and then who knows what will happen after that. So a lot of stuff that we want to talk about this week, and we encourage you to chime in as well. I have phones over here that have Twitter on them, and we want you to speak out on that social platform using the hashtag PNWeekly. PN Weekly is the hashtag you're looking for. Comment on some of the news of the week, and again, if you happen to be on emails, if you're not listening to this live at noon on this particular day, Well, fine, and head on to your email client and then go to podcast@pocketnow.com and just ask any question you want. We'll try and see if we can answer it. So, lots to look forward to. And in the meantime, we shall start off with the Surface Go. So, this happened this week. It happened on a Tuesday night, I believe. Hardware chief Panos Panay of Microsoft kind of just leaked, or well, not really leaked because it was official, but just put out little pictures, videos, everything about the Surface Go, which is what he says to be the smallest, lightweight Surface yet. Of course, I think he said that about the Surface laptop. It seems like everything is getting smaller, just more miniaturized. This is seen as the iPad competitor here, or the Chromebook competitor, as opposed to the Surface laptop, which was $999 dollars, not euro, dollars. And this is going to be kind of well, it has the Intel Pentium Gold processor, which is a good step up from Celeron, and it gets you
And the M
pretty
ones.
close.
Yeah.
The M's, yeah, definitely. But there's a lot of interesting kind of catches that you have to look forward to, especially when we're talking about a $399 base price here, because well, first of all, the base model has 4 gigs of RAM, but the storage here, 64 gigabytes, that's eMMC. If you upgrade to the one with the 128 gigabytes, that's an SSD, and that's certainly going to give you faster performance on memory. And it's $549, and that's not even to say that you don't get the type cover, which they're heavily promoting, and you don't get the Surface Pen. Those are separate costs, just like if you get it with the iPad. You get the Apple Pencil for $100. You get the cover with the keyboard for $130, and it's the same thing over here. So if you really want a pretty okay computing experience with the Surface Go, you're looking at $800 ish. So, Tony, I just want your kind of first blush, first reactions to all this.
I'm trying to make a sense of why this product exists, why it's out there. And I'm having a hard time figuring it out because there is the Surface, which is the pros, which is the more powerful unit, and whether it's a tablet or the laptop version, it doesn't really matter. And then we have this lower end entry level ish model, which is indeed cheaper. But as you said, if you add a keyboard, if you add the storage option, which is the SSD version with 128 gigs, you're pretty much up in the $800 zone. And it's running Windows version, which is the S1. Granted, it would be upgradable to Windows 10 Home, but for $900, you can get a MacBook Air, which is a full-fledged computer with a more powerful processor. So I'm guessing it all depends on what you want to use the device for. If it's some lightweight web browsing, some emails, or maybe some multimedia, then absolutely, if you're a Microsoft or Windows fan, you can go for that, and you can even save $100 off of the MacBook Air. But if you want to do anything more serious, not that the MacBook Air is such a powerful computer, but I myself and Mr. Mobile can probably testify, we have rendered lots of videos on MacBook Airs, and they until his one blew up 4 years or 3 years after doing a lot of video editing stuff, it really held its ground. So I'm trying to figure out what exactly is Microsoft's strategy here. Who are they targeting? Because it doesn't seem to be neither the simplest kind of device to compete with Chromebooks. It doesn't even seem to be the kind of device to compete with full-fledged computers. It's an in-between product, and I guess that might be its niche.
Hmm. Well, I think it was a particularly bad week to be announcing this, especially because we got word last night from Bloomberg that they're working on, or at least Adobe is working on Photoshop, full-fledged Photoshop for the iPad, which kind of takes away more of that air that the Surface Go would have in making the argument to lightweight computing, which, I mean, well, does this really mean that Apple was getting in the right sense of marketing its iPad with like
Could be.
what's a computer, what's whatever that girl was doing on the bus and whatnot, and then kind of making that kind of glib claim.
As tempting as it might be, I am trying, and so far I've succeeded, but I'm trying really, really hard to not compare a computer with the iPad or the iPad with another computer, because at the end of the day, the iPad, powerful as it is, with the powerful and strong ecosystem of apps that it might have, it is still a tablet. It is still running a mobile platform. And Windows 10, whether it's an S or home version, or Mac OS, it's a desktop operating system. So limitations are there, of course, for the iPad due to its operating system. There might be some limitations on Windows S as well, but in my mind, they just don't compete. So I wouldn't compare the newly announced Surface Go with the iPad. I would compare it against the MacBook Air or something along those lines.
Really? That might be that might be something. I mean, Chromebooks, I guess, would be the other branch of things, especially as we see a lot of push towards enterprise or education fleet deployment. What does this provide? Because Android is also getting its app games up, and they're becoming more fully featured as well.
Yes, true, true. Again, but with a Chromebook, correct me if I'm wrong. I have not used one. Isn't your operating system basically? Isn't your device basically booting off of the web,
It's not booting off of the web. It's its own contained device, but it's really all the
heavily
apps.
relying on the web?
Yeah, except they've really taken the integration with Android apps pretty seriously. So if you run them off your local storage, I mean that's totally fine, and that's kind of their way of cheating into an ecosystem, I guess.
Then I guess there's your competitor for the Surface Go. It's Chromebooks on one end, and it's the MacBook Air on the other hand.
Interesting. Well, we'll definitely want to see where this goes, and if the sales kind of even out between that kind of
I'd like to hear from listeners. Where do they think this product is situated? What's Microsoft targeting with this product? Because it can be a poor man's laptop, and it also can be a poor man's iPad. It's for me, it's not really clear.
yeah, it's not really clear to me either, especially if they're taking the Apple route of accessorizing at additional cost. So definitely chime in, hashtag PN Weekly on that. We'll get to your comments in a little short order. In the meantime, staying with the Microsoft theme, we are going to talk about the Surface Phone
Again,
slash Edgeramada slash whatever. And it's only in terms of sentiment here because I mean I don't think the story is that there are 15,000 or fans that are writing a petition for Microsoft to keep this secret project alive where I mean, renders have pictured it to be this kind of Switch like thing, this Nintendo Switch like thing, where you're able to combine two screens and then turn off one and then have the other one turned into like a work surface for typing and whatnot. But well, the fact is that the story is that 15,000 people have signed a petition, and uh, so this fan base is really, really weird in terms of mobile. I think there's always been a concern, or at least an insistence that Microsoft needs to have skin in the mobile game if it wants to compete past the second decade of the 21st century. And this, they've been trying so many ways, so many times. They've done it through many iterations of its Windows Phone platform. They've left behind a whole bunch of people along the way just because they didn't develop bridges between the version, from Mango to 8, from 8 to 10. Some of them weren't some of the phones weren't going to be supported on the way up, and some of them in making the transition to the Windows 10 mobile were promised to make the upgrade but eventually did not get the upgrade. And there was also the whole debacle of acquiring Nokia for its hardware and device services, and that didn't end up going well. They wrote off the whole investment. So I'm wondering what these people see in Microsoft that I don't necessarily see.
As strange, to use your words, as strange as this fan base is, I think they deserve our entire respect and Microsoft's respect, which is in the first place. Because if it weren't for this, or whatever's left of this so-called fanatic fan base for a mobile platform which its maker killed, Microsoft wouldn't have had half of the success it had a couple of years ago. So there's that. But on the other hand, everybody has moved on from Microsoft's operating system on mobile, even before Microsoft officially killed it off, because they entered the game late. There was this entire conversation back then whether Microsoft is late to the game, and there were many saying they were. There were many hoping that they are not. As it turns out, they were late to the game, but that's not what got them to lose at this game. I think that they made some decisions, some strategy decisions, which got them to this point. They were trying a completely different approach, and oh my god, yes, Windows Phone, the original version, Windows Phone 7, I think, with the live tiles was a great concept. But then again, along the way, it just, they didn't necessarily manage to keep up with the demands on the market. And just
Yeah.
to circle back to your Microsoft Nokia analogy, yeah, Microsoft managed to acquire Nokia, but Nokia didn't manage to save Microsoft. So there's that. I don't think that 10, 15, or even 100,000 people would be enough for Microsoft to actually manufacture a product or to get back into the mobile game. I do think that the market still needs Microsoft as a player, but Microsoft, I don't think, is willing to play again, at least not as in terms of software OS and hardware maker. They are really, really still deep in the game with collaborations with Android manufacturers on their services. Microsoft is pushing their services really hard now, whether that's Outlook or Word or the entire Office package for mobile. But I don't think we'll soon or ever. Well, let's never say ever, but I don't think we'll soon see Microsoft a key player again, neither in the smartphone manufacturer nor smartphone mobile operating system game. It would be cool to have a phone from Microsoft again, especially if I'm looking at the render right now, the Andromeda. It really resembles the I'm not sure which model it was, the Xperia, which was the foldable Xperia back 3 or 4 or 5 years ago. ZT, I think, has something similar.
Yeah.
It would be cool, but I don't think that it would sell enough to justify its existence. Maybe in a very limited supply with a huge price tag attached to it just for bragging rights. But other than that, still commendable effort from people who are still supporting Microsoft.
I think just to cap off the past here, that they've made Microsoft at least ambitious one-time moves that were not supported by sustained software development and support, and that was really just unfortunate for the ecosystem in general, and it didn't really work out for them. So moving forward, I mean, everyone is working on convergence, even though Apple is kind of the dark horse and saying that, oh, we're not going to merge iOS and macOS together. They're still kind of working strange behind the scenes, as evidenced by the Photoshop rumors for iPad. And there's also Google, which is working on its own thing that was formerly called Andromeda OS, but is now kind of I forget the name of it, Fuchsia, and it's going to be this multi-form factor kind of thing that can form fit. So Andromeda OS for Windows
Yep.
is said to be going to be the same thing, just a multi-form factor, Windows full-fledged power wherever you go. So I mean, it makes sense, but it'll be a couple years at the very least, I would think, to before we get to that point. So
If we
like I said,
ever.
if we ever do. It sometimes if you like, it feels like we're going so fast. We're kind of like the road runner and running through a whole bunch of little tiny progressions like bezels and whatnot. But we don't really take a look at the big picture that often, and sometimes it feels like we're kind of like the background doesn't move, and we just keep running up the stairs, and it's like there's no end in sight. But eventually, we'll get there.
I think that Microsoft has been, aside from the fact that they had those decisions which got them to where they are now, I think that they, or Microsoft's competitors, let's say that, Apple and Google, and if we talk about device manufacturers, all the rest, whether it's Samsung, LG, Huawei, you name them, they're so far ahead that I don't think that there's anything Microsoft could do at this point. They had like, what, when was Windows Phone first launched? 2012, 2013, somewhere around that. They had 5 years, half a decade to do something meaningful, which they did up to a point. Still not enough to catch in several regions double-digit market share, but it was still a starting effort. They should have built on that. But now, after they completely gave up on the approach and they took a step back, if they are missing from a game for a year or two, the gap would be so big that Microsoft will not be able to just bridge it. It's like a boxer who just sits back home and eats pizza and drinks beer for 6 months, and at his first match, the opponent is just fit and in best shape.
I think Ben Folds wrote a song about that. I'm not sure if you've ever are familiar with his work.
No, but I will definitely look him up. I didn't quote him, but if that's a quote, then I will give credit where credit is due.
Well, take a listen. It's good music in any case. Let's talk about the iPhone SE and the iPhone 10. A couple of analysts here from Bluefin Research say that Apple is going to cut production of the iPhone 10 and iPhone SE at some point to make way for the new iPhones for this year. And from what it sounds like, it doesn't seem like we're going to get a continuation of either model. iPhone 10, that's the stock you're going to get, and iPhone SE has had a 2-year run, I guess you could say, and it just kind of served. We talked about sequels for the whole, like from all the way from fall up until maybe like a month ago, and
I think it was May.
Yeah, things have fizzled out from that Alexar, the case manufacturer, because they always seem to have the inside track on these sorts of things, and they say that the iPhone SE2 is not going to be happening. So, unfortunate for those fans that really wanted an updated version of the 4-inch iPhone. I guess kind of maybe it's not right to say let's do a post mortem, but what do you think of the legacy of the 4-inch size at this point?
While I have the utmost respect for all analysts, I have never trusted analysts. I don't know why. It's just the problem is with me, not with them. I think that there are a bunch of people who are just opining on something and claiming knowledge of something, just like us. Granted, we've been doing this for 10 years and closely monitoring the industry. Analysts are analysts. Anyways, I think that it makes sense for Apple to kill the iPhone SE because Apple's habit of releasing a new smartphone every year makes last year's phone obviously a cheaper option. And the other phone, which was a 2-year-old phone now, so for instance, in this particular case, the model from 2016 will become the lowest and the cheapest phone. Having an even cheaper SE phone, granted in a 4-inch form factor, no longer makes sense. Because if you look at the entire market right now, I don't think that you will find many phones which are 4-inch big, 4-inch small, you name it. I think that we are now at a point where the standard is pretty much getting closer to 4.7 and above, maybe 5 plus. So many people would probably use it and buy it, but once Apple draws the line and they make their calculation, it probably makes a lot of sense for them to say, okay, we're not going to sell hundreds of thousands or millions. We're just going to sell a couple, and it makes no sense for us to just hold an entire production line captive because of a unit which might or might not succeed. So we're just going to free it up, use it, repurpose it for something else, and maybe ramp up our production yields to support production for whatever model is selling best. And for the iPhone 10, there were rumors. I'm guessing it will pretty much be certain at one point soon that the iPhone 10 will not have a sequel in its current iteration as we know the iPhone 10, which could make sense because the iPhone 10 was a anniversary edition, an anniversary release. The next iPhone will probably take a lot of design cues and elements from the iPhone 10. So there's that. That means that the iPhone 10, as expensive as it is now, will become even more expensive once nobody will produce it. So if you will have next year a top-notch iPhone 10, it will be a lot more expensive.
Yeah. Or it could just Apple could use that as the paradigm shift for their design and just make everything kind of that weird design that they have with the notch and the Super Retina display and whatnot.
So aside from our own ex-colleague Juan Carlos Bagnell, who really was the only person enjoying the iPhone SE, I haven't seen any in the wild. As strange as it may sound, I've seen people with very, very small hands, even ladies with even smaller hands, use iPhone 8 Pluses. At one point, I even made a joke that the iPhone 8 Plus screen size is in many cases as big as their entire head. But I think that what I'm trying to say is people are no longer looking for a small device. They're looking for a big device because, number one, they're consuming a lot of media. They're watching a lot of movies, streaming YouTube, Netflix. They're showing off their pictures. And a bigger phone speaks for maybe a bigger ego. I don't know. I'm just saying.
Oh man, well we're gonna get in trouble with people with small hands and big egos.
No, I have the utmost. I have huge hands, and I was using the HP Veer, so it couldn't get any more awkward than that.
Well, I was about to only just mention someone's name who rhymes with Tronald Dump. I'm just not gonna. I'm not gonna get into that. A couple of comments from the hashtag PN Weekly on Twitter. I do want to give a shout out. Peter Hayton says, I do want to give a shout out to Tony and Jules for getting through this week. You have both done a great job, and I have continued to support Pocketnow in any capacity I'm able to.
Thank you.
I know a transition like this is rough, but all my thoughts are with you. Thank you for that,
Appreciate
Peter.
it.
Renata Laporte says, what I cannot understand is why call it Surface for the Surface Go. Up until now, the Surface was a more like a premium product. So it seems Microsoft wants to take down on the mid-range market, but I don't see what good this does to the Surface name. I think it kind of devalues it in a sort of sense. Or well, maybe if because they had the Surface 3 for the longest time, and that was kind of the entry level to the market. But I don't remember any kind of critical kind of um, really takedowns of that device. It was just it served its purpose. So
I'm just happy to see that we are not the only ones not understanding what Microsoft is trying to do with the Surface.
because this is kind of layers on layers of a Surface, where this base Surface device, like I feel like the Surface name encompasses a whole experience,
Yeah.
lock and stock, and this doesn't provide it. So, yeah,
Correct
explain
me if
that
I'm
much.
wrong, but I think that Surface as a brand, as the word, as Microsoft first used it, didn't it refer to that huge touch capable table which you were able to interact with either via touch or placing stuff on it? Wasn't that the initial Surface? And then we went into the Surface computers and the Surface thingy on a wall.
That did come first. I think it was the Surface Hub, if I'm not
You know,
mistaken.
that big ass pool table.
That big ass pool. Yeah, yeah, totally. I'm not sure whether it was called the Surface Hub or something else, but
Nonetheless,
it
it was a Surface.
was a Surface, a large surface,
Yes.
literally. So yeah. Well, we'll have to see how the Surface Go develops and if consumers will take to it at the very least. So, talk more about that in just a bit. In the meantime, we'll take a break here and tell you a little bit more about one of our sponsors. The Pocketnow Weekly is brought to you by LinkedIn Jobs. Now, you probably know LinkedIn as a networking site that helps you connect with colleagues, references, and potential employers. But if you're one of those employers looking to hire the right candidate for your specific position, why not consider LinkedIn Jobs? After all, 70% of the US workforce is already on LinkedIn, with 22 million professionals looking at new listings every single week. And all of them are already sharing the skills, experiences, and geographic reach they've gained over the course of their careers. Why not put that data to work for you? Hundreds of thousands of businesses have already posted their positions, and they rate LinkedIn jobs 40% better than the average job board for getting them the person they needed. Heck, you might just find someone that you would have otherwise missed elsewhere. And if you're not with LinkedIn jobs already, you don't have to miss out. Get $50 off your first job posting by going to linkedin.com/weekly. That's linkedin.com/weekly for $50 off. Terms and conditions apply. Welcome back to the Pocketnow Weekly, and we have a little bit more for you in terms of the phone side of things. I know we're kind of going into kind of the the middle of the surface of the phone and tablet space, phablets. More than that, I'm not sure. But and then we also talked about the death of a phone, and I really want to encourage the mobile industry to keep on living at this point. So why not have 5 cameras on every single phone that you produce? Just a thought. So last week, I believe, or maybe a couple weeks
It
ago, we
was it
started.
was 2 weeks ago, yes, because it was the episode on which I was here, and I have such a deja vu because I will have to probably just repeat everything I said 2 weeks ago about the LG V40. But nonetheless, it's an interesting conversation, one that
Yeah,
I
I'm going to
really
pull up the script for you, and you can just read it off right there. So we're talking about the Galaxy S10, even though the Galaxy Note 9 has not been released yet. And we're going to just say it: the biggest Galaxy S10 variant will have 5 cameras, 3 rear cameras, and 2 selfie cameras. Of course, we have less of an idea of what that's going to be about because we had some sort of reporting for the LG V40, which is supposed to be out this fall, where the we had an idea that maybe LG was going to do its usual kind of wide angle and then super wide angle for the back, and then do some sort of stereoscopic facial authentication for the front. And with over here, we don't really have much of an idea. There are 2 selfie cameras. Maybe one of them is going to be wide angle, and then the 3 on the back is I well they say it's going to be the zoom wide and then super wide, but um, because I saw the P20 Pro review or the in-depth camera photographer's guide from Adam Z. Lane, and he found that the 41 megapixel sensor or whatever it was really just the best all-around camera sensor that he just used, and
I agree.
um,
I have to agree.
the zoom sensor didn't really, do its job the best, and then the regular kind of monochrome sensor was didn't really do its job too well, or at least, I mean, I guess Adam would sort of characterize it differently, but that's the takeaway I got from this. So it all depends on whether or not Samsung gets its gear together and makes each sensor the best at what they can do.
I just to be very, very clear, in my opinion, I still don't think that it makes sense for Samsung to release 3 Galaxy S models, even if we're talking about S Plus, S Pro, regardless of the name, Beyond Zero, Beyond One, Beyond Two. Not that it wouldn't sell, because Samsung is at a point where, regardless of what they put out, just like Apple, just like there are not so many companies which can pull this off, but Samsung and Apple can pull this off. If they would have probably 5 models, they would sell like hotcakes as well. it doesn't make sense in my mind from a strategic point of view, from a product family point of view. I touched up upon this and I talked at length 2 weeks ago, so I'm not going to reiterate this. But again, I was wrong before, so don't take my word for it. I'm just saying that in my opinion it makes no sense. But let's just play with the idea of having a Pro or Plus or whatever you name it, 5 camera phone. Again, I can only say what I said 2 weeks ago. If it makes sense, if that added camera brings value to the customer, brings value to the user, then sure, please slap it on and make it do some wonderful things for you. But just don't add it for bragging rights, because every component you add to a smartphone dramatically increases its price point. And phones in 2017 and 2018 have already become so expensive. Of course, they bring tremendous value to your life. Nowadays, you can basically live off of your phone, but just don't add something which will further increase the price point if that something will not bring value to your life. And when it comes to cameras, of course, we all love our smartphone photography, but I don't think that maybe instead of just doing one extra camera for, I don't know, one added feature or a single feature, whether that's zooming in or wide angle or anything, maybe invest in something else, battery life, or any other feature which a user could find useful on a day-by-day basis. Because a camera, yes, of course, you use it daily, but how many times do you actually use a specific mode of the camera or a specific lens in the dual or triple lens setup? So that's just my 2 cents. On the front, it's okay. It makes sense, whether it's stereoscopic for face detection or for extra added bokeh effects that we so much love, because we all love our beauty shots with bokeh effects, especially from a selfie perspective. I can't live with it without it. I'm sorry. Yes, it's a natural evolution. It's a natural evolution.
Say
Don't
what you really feel, man. Say what you really
I'm
feel.
I'm right here pouring out my soul to you guys. Seriously. Face recognition is indeed the next step. We are heading towards that. Apple kicked it off. He was not the first one, but they made it mainstream. We had the iris scanning. We will have face mapping. Of course, that's definitely doable, but others have done it with a single camera as well. So I'm not saying it doesn't make sense. I'm just saying that, please, guys, if you do this, if you add 5 cameras or 6 cameras, just make them useful.
Everything is an eventuality, man. Everything is going to be 5 cameras, 6 cameras, and whatnot. I think it's going to be one of those trend of the year things that doesn't get carried on into the next dimension.
Well, I've got an
Uh,
idea. Whoever's a smartphone manufacturer, because I know that they all listen to our podcast, just slap a single 360 camera on your smartphone, and boom, you got it. You got front, you got back, you got left, you got right, you got up, you got down. There you have it. You solved the problem.
I wonder what that would look like, and what like a feasible design would be for that kind of thing. That'd be
Well,
interesting.
if just copyright and trademark my idea, and just give me, I don't know, 2 cents on a
Sure,
dollar.
2 cents on a dollar. That's a pretty reasonable royalty rate. Yeah, I think that'll do good. All right, deal. All right, let's talk about well, let's talk about an anecdote here. Let's talk about cases. Let's talk about the OnePlus 6. So, it's one of these little one-off stories on Reddit that seems to have gotten a lot of traction in terms of the OnePlus 6, and that involves the nylon case that you can get with it. And I was actually talking with one of our PR relations with PR representatives, excuse me, over at OnePlus about this story here. And it starts off with this guy who got a OnePlus 6 recently, has always had on that nylon case that looks pretty snazzy with it. We saw a little bit of that with Jaime Rivera showing off the red color last week, and it looks pretty good. And he's only had it about a few days. He has a daughter, and you know how kids always seem to get their hands on things, and then sometimes they drop those things, and things happen after that. But you would figure with a case on, at least that covers the full surface of the back, that it will probably protect the glass back of the OnePlus 6 from cracking. Well, after what, 3 drops, he said, The picture that we see on the rundown here, or at least on this story, which you can get onto the rundown at pocketnow.com, but the story here is not pretty. We got some spider webbing going on, some chipped glass coming out of there, and you know, the design of the case comes into question here because there is not like a full but it's a full bumper case, but it doesn't cover the buttons because I mean they could have installed like proxy buttons where it's like a plunger and you could just like press the plunger in order to press the button and whatnot, but there's actually just negative space instead. You know where the crack originates from? That little bit of negative space between the volume rocker and the glass. That really, it's like really annoying, really like just horrible, and I hate it. And well, I guess there's always a lesson to take out of this because even with cases, like, there's always that debate of naked and case and whether or not you use either or go with either lifestyle. But like, you would expect for a case that this would be okay, that this, you'd be able to get some protection out of it. But I mean, I don't know. What do you think? Because I do have the follow up to what the original poster of this said.
I'm trying to phrase this in a way to which would not offend people, but I'm not going to be the likable guy now, and I'm probably going to play with the devil's advocate. A phone is not a toy. A phone is also a thing, especially nowadays, which breaks easily. So I'm not trying to point fingers or put the blame on anybody, but just how many times does your kid need to drop your phone in order for you to no longer give it to him, or for you to just put it one shelf higher so your kid cannot reach it? I'm not saying that it couldn't happen. It could have broken at the first drop. What I'm saying is that these phones are not meant to be abused, especially since the trend nowadays is glass. And we have an editorial on Pocketnow written by Nicholas Gray about how he's tired of glass back phones. And actually, when we played along with the idea of running this editorial, I asked him, okay, why are you so much against glass backed phones? Because he broke his glass backed HTC as well. And I told him that yes, glass breaks. Glass is pretty, but glass breaks. I personally have not dropped a single phone in my life, but that is me. But at one point where you are spending so much dollars, euros, you name it, on a phone, you'd expect to take more care of it. Now, I'm not saying to just put it on a table and never use it, but just don't drop it, don't throw it around. And especially if you do have a kid, you might want to sure buy him a phone if you want your kid to have a phone in its early ages. I wouldn't give my kid a phone until he would be probably almost 14, 15, 16 years old, because I really think that that's not what kids needs to do. But if you decided that your kid needs or wants a phone, just buy them either a rugged phone or something really cheap which he can toss around. Just cherish your flagship phone. That's my 2 cents. I'm pretty sure many of you will not agree with me, but this is my strong belief that it's the user's fault. If this would have happened, I don't know, because of overheating while charging or a design flaw, yes. But any phone made out of glass, if you drop it once or twice, it'll break. And there's no case on the planet that will probably save it, save for the smartphone airbags, which I've seen that were invented like 1 or 2 weeks ago. Yeah, that's an awesome invention, but that's the true fact of it. Even if it's an aluminum phone, it'll get a dent, it'll not break, but it will still look ugly.
Or maybe a couple of otter boxes. I don't know, and like
Yeah.
a couple of them. But like I agree that a case is not an insurance policy. You don't get anything back from the company just because you were able to break it with the case. And I guess there's also the reasonable use kind of parameters that we have to look at. Oh, it dropped like a couple of feet because the child's from a couple feet tall, and it just happened to hit that kind of area where that kind of cracking could happen. Like there are a whole bunch of factors here, but the fact is that no case bats 1,000. There is no 100% guarantee in terms of hardware, physical kind of protection for that kind of thing, unless you actually go out and say, "Hey, insurance provider, I'm going to pay you this amount of money, and I expect you to give me something back to if I ever break it." So uh, I definitely agree. It seems like the original poster definitely agrees with that. Acknowledges his position in terms of getting a repair, which I believe the quote was $80, and that's not including shipping and handling.
Well,
Or
try
just keep.
try to do that for your iPhone and see how much it
Oh
costs.
yeah, totally, totally. But I mean, could just keep the case on all the time. After all, it's just a design thing. The internals were not harmed. The he got a display protector, which again kind of goes into what we're talking about in terms of hardware protection. But still, the display isn't cracked. Internals are fine, and it looks nice with the nylon case. So why not just keep it on all the time? So I mean, everyone will have their kind of philosophy on this. I encourage you, talk to us, hashtag PN Weekly, because this is kind of the everyday use sort of thing that we kind of go into whenever we're buying a phone. And it's like, hey, how should I live my life with my phone?
And there's always the other side of the coin, the other side of the story. I have had plenty of phones in my life because I'm a reviewer, but I also love technology. And I always on the phones which I have purchased myself from my own pocket, used cases. Because number one, it offers protection. When you drop it, it might survive. Don't rely on your case to just save your phone when you drop it, but it might survive on one hand. On the other hand, keeping your phone in a case will ensure that next year, when you want to upgrade or you want to sell it, your phone will be in mint top notch condition and your resale price will be much higher than what you get for a phone which is all jacked up on the back or cracked or scratched. So for me, it's also an investment, air quotes, decision, thinking long term that if I have the iPhone 8 Plus now, if I keep it in a case, maybe next year, if it's in mint condition, I need to just put a little bit more towards it to buy the new model than if it would be completely ruined. But I understand that not everybody is like me, and I understand that for some people a phone is really just a phone. So there's that.
Andrew Wallace says, "Well, I'm going to stick with my aluminum Mate 9. Lol."
Yes, great.
That's always kind of the glib response that we get. Hey, it's a valid one because if you look hard enough, you'll find something else that you'll want in the phone marketplace. So hey, I mean, good luck to you if you're looking at the marketplace right now in 2018, but you should be able to find something, hopefully. Let's move on to our final topic, which I know everyone has been kind of dumping on, and so I just wanted to tackle it just because I wanted to do the whole devil's advocate thing in terms of defending HTC because I think since the start. When they announced this Exodus, this blockchain phone, I was making the case that they're not viable as a mainstream smartphone maker. There's only so far that they're able to act as an ODM because Google now has all of their hardware engineers that they need, and they probably won't be coming back to HTC to continue giving them money. So, if there's anything that they want to try, it's going to have to be something that differentiates them in some way. And be it a blockchain phone, be it a Vive VR phone, which has been kind of hinted at a couple of times. I feel like the specialist way is something that's worth trying at and worth seeking out the niche audience if they can. The blockchain is kind of a harder argument to talk about here because people are very dismissive of it. They don't understand it, and it's just like anything. If you're talking with your child and they start talking about the latest trend, you probably won't understand it, but it's still a valid thing because um, like in the past several months, we've seen the blockchain used in China to keep a copy of a manifesto from a sexual assault victim at a Chinese university. And in a society where in the government where the government is very censorship heavy and was able to scrub a lot of the references of that sexual assault case against allegations against the teacher. The story survived, and so that's one way that this whole blockchain thing can still work out. And even though we're talking about a lot of these typical cryptocurrency crypto kitties, which they're uh, partnering with to kind of up the appeal of this thing, this probably around $1,000 phone. um I, I mean, it's there's some importance to it. I think you should be encouraged to look at some of the stories, maybe a couple of podcasts about blockchains explaining what it could do and explaining virtual reality for what it matters, because who knows, because these are emergent technologies, and if they're going to have an increasing role in our lives, which these experts advocating for their standards say they are, then, well, you should probably at least take the time to not be afraid of it. That's my take. What do you think?
I was hearing your words, and I'm not gonna say I didn't understand everything you said, but there were some things I didn't understand, and I found it funny that you mentioned the younger generation kids and the older generation parents, fathers in this particular case. It shows that you're like 15 years older, younger than I am, because you're so much into this. I need to be into this because this is my job, but I'm just trying to imagine a scenario that you need to explain, or a kid needs to explain his dad what blockchain is. Anyways,
Well, I think it could be even as simple as like some of the McDonald's. If you go to eat out at fast food restaurants, they have they're now starting to incorporate screens. You don't go up to a counter anymore, and some people sort of have trouble with dealing with the screens. So, I
by the
mean, that's
way,
one
this
example.
this episode is not sponsored by McDonald's, but we
It
are
is sponsored by
welcoming.
Burger King.
But we are welcoming them if they do want to. Getting back to the serious topic, the issue, the HTC. I think that HTC, sadly, and I say this in all seriousness, I'm really, really sad that HTC has lost its compass. I really feel that HTC is a shadow of what it was years ago, and that they're really desperately trying to do something meaningful. And I really think that going with a niche product will not be the proper decision to save the company in the smartphone business. I think I don't have a major in business. I don't claim to have any knowledge of how the market works if you are a smartphone manufacturer. But in my mind, you can become meaningful if you do a product, if you manufacture a product which sells volumes. Now, if you're limiting your options from the get-go and you're coming up with a product which is addressing only a small chunk of the audience, granted, I think that there, in the article you mentioned, there are about 30 million blockchain users. That's, even if each and every one of them would buy an HTC Exodus, it still wouldn't be meaningful in the grand scheme of things when Samsung and Apple sell huge volumes, and even LG and Huawei and ZTE and so on. So I think that having a niche product like this would make sense if it goes in pair or as an alternative to a product which is a flagship product in the top even 5, which sells volumes. So yes, granted, but correct me if I'm wrong, and this is a question to you, Jules, or to anybody from our audience who is knowledgeable in the blockchain and mining and everything. Can't you already do this stuff on your regular smartphone? I mean, you can mine for virtual currencies. You can basically use any sort of horsepower available in your device, whether that's a laptop, a computer, a phone, or a website, a server, to mine for these currencies. Do you have to have a special? What's special about this HTC Exodus?
So, I mean, in terms of just mining for cryptocurrencies, which is kind of the main attention grabbing sort of thing that has been associated with the blockchain, you don't really need any. Well, it's just mainly concentrated on raw horsepower
And a
that you
lot of
need
it.
to crack into a lot of formulas and to authenticate certain things and whatever. But I think the wider applications should be considered here, which is access to a decentralized app service at an app store that it's something like Cydia, as opposed to the app store where you only get verification from other users of that network, or in internet traffic. Like, that can act as its own sort of VPN in sort of a way. So that's a sort of the larger picture that they want to take of this. But in terms of cryptocurrency, you can pretty much do it from any computer. And there's always a concern that some sites are going to use whatever, uh, like they're going to attack your computer and use whatever spare computing power that you have to mine for cryptocurrencies without your authorization. So there's a whole bunch of other kind of worries that you have to make when it comes to using non non-specific types of computers.
Well, there's that. I just want to give a shout out. I'm looking at the comments here to. Come on, I lost it. Where are you? Yes, Pedro Andrade. Thank you. I don't think I'm out of context. I think that there's a huge difference between the region you're living in and the region I'm living in, and then there's also a difference between the people you're surrounded with. If I haven't seen people use iPhone SEs, it doesn't mean that the iPhone SE is not a phone which is worth selling or buying. It just means that in my life, where I live, where I travel, I haven't seen people use it. If you think that that's out of context, by all means, but please give me some of your arguments as well, aside from the fact that you've seen two people use an iPhone SE.
Yeah. I think Renata Laporte gave an example back on Twitter that the iPhone SE was a fairly popular phone in the Netherlands for some reason. I'm going to have to look that comment up. I was trying to look up Pedro's comment so that we could, but he just commented a couple minutes ago. Now the iPhone 5C was a flop. Poor choice of hardware and design. So talking about the iPhone 5C and how it was executed as opposed to the iPhone SE. And yeah, there's a whole bunch of arguments that could be made to say that both of them were framed differently. 5C, SC, a lot of them share they share a lot of similarities in terms of form factor and like what they did. It's just the branding, the imaging was not really right for them. So definitely agree on that case. And there's just a whole bunch of other PN Weekly comments here. Daniel Miladnov, speaking of HTC and cracking glass backs, can HTC make another aluminum unibody flagship before throwing in the towel? I second that opinion. I still, well, I don't have the HTC 10 that I had about a year and a half ago, but I still have the 1M7. So HTC, if you're out there, basically make an update to this. I'll be fine.
You know, there's
Uh,
there's there's one thing which I wanted to touch on. Of course, you need to have a glass-backed smartphone if you want to take advantage of wireless charging. To me, in my mind, it makes sense. Either you have wireless charging or you have aluminum backed phones. What doesn't make sense in my mind is for a manufacturer to produce a product which does not support wireless charging and still make it glass back and say that this was a decision in order to improve, I don't know, reception or antenna performance. Come on, guys. I
no,
mean,
yeah,
we've seen phones from 2000 and moving forward through plastic, aluminum, and all sorts, and none of them had great big issues with reception except the death grip of the iPhones of back then. This doesn't make sense in my mind to use this particular argument. It does make sense if you're going the wireless charging route, but if your phone doesn't support wireless charging, just maybe consider manufacturing a phone which is an aluminum phone and it won't break. But then again, if it doesn't break, you will never repair it or replace it. So there's that.
nope. And finally, from Peter Hayton, given Samsung's past with previous flagships, I worry that we could have 5 cameras for 5 gimmicks, plus the design status it would likely create. I think it is difficult even for Samsung to make each a good implementation to stack up to completion. Galaxy S10, a lot of software that has to be implemented with that, and unfortunately, even with Samsung as big as it is for a Chable, I don't think they have the dedicated teams to continue to not only
Yeah.
create but maintain those individual features. If we're already going to get like all these features with each little lens or each little change, I don't think that really makes sense. So it'll probably just be kind of augmented by the same sorts of AR, AI, insert acronym here. So yeah, like I guess that's the base the default state that we're in. Mm,
Agreed.
yeah. Well, I really did. I want lunch. I'm so hungry right now. So, and you probably want dinner too. You want to get out of the house. So, thank you so much for participating in the
Thanks.
weekly this week.
Thanks for having me. Anytime you need me, just say the word.
Indeed, we'll have you back on pretty soon,
It's a
hopefully.
pleasure.
And in the meantime, I am going to start leading us out of this podcast so that I can get food. Be sure to keep the conversation going by emailing us at podcast@pocketnow.com. We really want to hear the thoughts you want to get out and the questions you need answered. Also, we are all on Twitter, #PN Weekly. Tony is at ANTONDNAGY. I'm on Twitter at Point Jewels. Pocket Now is at Pocket Now on Twitter, Facebook, Google Plus, and YouTube in English and Spanish, Espanol, where you can find more news on the Pocket Now daily every weekday. We also have a lovely site, pocketnow.com, for all your mobile tech needs. We certainly appreciate reviews and ratings on this podcast wherever you happen to be listening to us. Without them, we wouldn't have been making the show for the past 6 years.
Oh my God.
Yeah, believe it or not. For the team, I'm Jules Wong, and peace out. I'm going to have myself a sandwich.
Stay safe, everyone.